and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to the one and only Rock and Wrestling Podcast. Glorious, no, I won't give in till I'm victorious, and I will defend. From far and wide and light years away, cast from the shadows and I light my way. You think you know me? I'm just a sexy boy. Oh, I'm not your boy toy. I'm just a sexy. I am a real American. Fight for the rights of every man. Without further ado, from parts unknown, your host with the most, Nick. I am a real American. Fight for the rights of
All right, welcome to this week's edition of the Rock and Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, Nick, and we got a huge guest, probably the biggest guest I've ever had on the show, Mr. Dizzy Reed himself from my opinion, the greatest band ever, Guns N' Roses. He's on the show today. I sat down with him this past weekend to talk about his solo record called Rock and Roll Ain't Easy. That's a hell of a title, and we talk about that, but we talked all about his solo record, his other band, Hookers and Blow. Damn, that's a great name. Also, just him general and getting into Guns N' Roses and everything in the name of that. And he's, believe it or not, he's in a fraternity and a sorority. We talk a lot about that. So, some really, really good stuff, and looking forward to everybody hearing that as I sat down with Mr. Dizzy Reed from Guns N' Roses. So, before we get started, though, I want to give kind of a bow on last week's double 2 episodes with Jarvis and Muhammad Hassan. Great feedback. If you haven't done so, go back into the archives, check those out with Jarvis, the lead singer from Night Demon, and Mark Capani, formerly in the WWE as Muhammad Hassan. Great interviews, great feedback. I want to mention once again that I will be at StarCast Labor Day weekend. Now, if you're not a podcaster or anything like that, I would definitely recommend to go. Go and get your tickets now because it's awesome. They're going to have stuff where you can wear a Ric Flair robe. You can pose with a championship belt. Personally, my favorite, I've already started working on my promo. You get to be interviewed by Tony Schiavone and cut a promo on the old WTBS superset. It's going to be crazy. There's going to be the NWO panel. There's going to be the Monday Night War, the roast of Bruce Pritchard, a TNA panel. It's going to be crazy. I'm going to be on Podcast Row. It starts Thursday, August 30th. It runs through Sunday, September 2nd in Chicago. It's going to be there in conjunction with the All In event. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be a good time. So if you're going to be in the Chicago area that weekend, if you haven't got your tickets already, it's pretty much sold out. All the VIPs are, but there's still a few general admission tickets left. Go and get those general admission tickets because it's going to be awesome. If you're going to be there, come say hi. We'll have a couple of drinks and talk wrestling, talk rock, all that good stuff. I want to give a shout out, though, real quickly. Speaking of Chicago and pro wrestling tees, as you know, that's where you can get your official Rock and Wrestling Podcast store t-shirts. Go over to prowrestlingtees.com/Rock and Wrestling Podcast store. Get yourself a tank top, t-shirt, long sleeve, whatever you want. I'm going to have a second t-shirt available for you guys in the coming, I would say, week or so. It should be up, may even be up sooner by the end of this week. It is called the R&W shirt. It's a little bit of a, I won't say rip-off because I don't want to get sued by WWE, but it's a little take on the old NWO t-shirt. Want to give a shout-out to my main man, The Creature Lives. He's a graphic designer. He came up with this fairly fast. He's really, really good. Go over and follow him on Instagram at @thecreature_lives. Also the same on Twitter. He does posters, screen print, large formal print. Also does T-shirts, stickers. He's dabbles a little bit. He's got some action figures and some toy collecting. Maybe you can get, if you're a toy collector, you can trade, talk about all that. So go check him out. He did some phenomenal work. That T-shirt's going to be up here, as I said, in the coming weeks on the Rock and Wrestling Podcast store on Pro Wrestling Tees. So get yourself looking too sweet, NWO style with the R&W logo. You'll see what I mean. I'm going to post some pictures a little bit later when this drops. You can kind of check it out, but it'll be up on Pro Wrestling Tees. Make sure you follow the podcast on Twitter, Nick's RW Podcast. Make sure Rock and Wrestling Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, Nick's Rock and Wrestling Podcast, the Gmail, Rock and Wrestling Podcast at Gmail. Go to Pro Wrestling Tees, help your brother out, get yourself a T-shirt, all that good stuff. So, Dizzy Reed coming up shortly on the other side here. We talked a lot about his solo record, and I'm going to pitch his solo record a little bit here. If you haven't done it yet, go listen to it. If you like Guns N' Roses, it's right in that vein. I would say it's very, very good. We talked a lot about the musicians, the songwriting process, all of that, but it's called Rock and Roll Ain't Easy. It's available on digital download now, like iTunes. You can go stream it on Spotify, like I do with most of my music these days on Spotify. But it is good stuff. The first track, called This Doesn't Look Like Vegas, is good stuff. Mother Teresa's a really great track. Dirty Bomb, really top of the line stuff. And it's surprising that, not surprising, but reassuring that Dizzy Reed, he's the second longest tenured member of Guns N' Roses. And it's really cool to see somebody put out a solo record like that and it be really, really good stuff. I mean, it's top of the line. He even says that Richard Fortus, who's the other guitar player in Guns N' Roses right now, he did some solo work on it. Del James, if you remember him, he kind of dabbled in a bunch of bands. He's big time. He did some management, some other things with Guns N' Roses. He said he was all over this. He had guys, Ricky Warwick from Black Star Riders and then Lizzie, all kinds of guys. It's a great, great record. It's definitely right now for me, I would say, my nominee for Record of the Year. It's top good stuff. It's solid, just slamming rock and roll. It's, Appetite for Destruction thrown in with a little bit of sleaze 70s rock is what I would call it. And yes, there's going to be heavy featured piano and keys because Dizzy, that's what he plays, but he's got a phenomenal voice, and they do it very kind of tastefully. You can see what it is in the very first song. It's very, very cool as it comes in. It's not anything that is abrasive, and it's piano-based music. It's very rock and roll, still riff-based, in your face, killer stuff. So go check it out. Stream it on Spotify. The physical copies come out June 1st. He's going to be doing some touring with the Dead Daisies with his other band, Hookers and Blow. So check them out in a city near you. So I would definitely do that. Before we get into the interview with Dizzy Reed, just want to go over the quick schedule as this comes out Wednesday, May 23rd. I'm going to go over the quick schedule of guests we've got coming up next Wednesday, May 30th. Going to have the Podfather himself, Conrad Thompson from Something to Wrestle With, Bruce Pritchard, What Happened When Monday with Tony Schiavone, 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff. He's also the brainchild of StarCast, which I will be at Podcast Row on. He put all the StarCast together. I'm going to sit down with him this weekend. We're going to talk all about that. Those are probably, What Happened When is my favorite podcast. Tony Schiavone is my favorite wrestling announcer of all time. It's just over-the-top, hilarious stuff. I'm going to talk to him all about that. StarCast, all of it. So it's going to be really, really cool. Conrad kind of, is just like me. He's a big wrestling fan. He's running wrestling podcasts. Hell, he's on the WWE Network now, and it's going to be great to pick his brain because he's kind of one of the inspirations I had for starting a podcast like this, just being a wrestling fan, being a rock and roll fan, and here we are. And it's crazy to think I sat down this weekend with Dizzy Reed, a guy who I just saw him play, in an arena in November with Guns N' Roses. The following week, June 6th, will be Conrad's good buddy, Matt Kuhn. Matt Kuhn does all of the music for Conrad's podcast, 83 Weeks, What Happened When, something to wrestle with. He also has his own podcast with Impact Wrestling star Robbie E. called Wine Ended. I highly recommend checking that one out because it's just very, very. They talk to guys that had a shining moment wrestling and then they're gone. Guys, former Just Incredible, Mark Capone were both on their show just like they were on here. But they also talked to Cherry from Deuce and Domino. They also talked to Al Snow, D'Lo Brown. So really, really cool stuff. Glacier was their first episode, was phenomenal. So go check that out. Matt Coon's going to be on the June 6th episode, and then the Wednesday, June 13th, will be Braden. He is a local musician in the Bay Area, Suburban Paranoia. He's done some drumming with some other bands. He's also got a big festival he's putting together. He's also a huge wrestling fan. So we're going to have him on to talk all about his festival coming up, shoot the shit on some wrestling. So that will be coming up. That's what the coming weeks, the next 3 weeks look like. Got some other big stuff coming up, just like StarCast coming up, and it's going to be good stuff. So make sure you follow the podcast on Twitter, Nick's R&W Podcast. Make sure you go to Facebook, Nick's Rock and Wrestling Podcast, Instagram, Rock and Wrestling Podcast, rockandwrestlingpodcast@gmail.com, and make sure you go over to prowrestlingtees.com. Get yourself the Rock and Wrestling Podcast t-shirt. Gonna have the new one up thanks to my man over at The Creature Lives for designing it. And got a little sponsorship, a little shout out I want to give out to you called, it's a Father's Day is just coming up for those of you that didn't know. Sunday, June 17th. Also Money in the Bank. Great Father's Day gift for them. But what is better for your father than a little alcohol? Yes, that's right. Dizzy Reed on the other side, we're going to talk to you about Guns N' Roses. He knows a little something about drinking the booze, but I'm talking about whiskey, Rack House Whiskey Club. So go over to rackhousewhiskeyclub.com. Basically, this is what it is. Every whiskey tells a story. So basically, this is how it works. It's a subscription box service that delivers a package filled with one select premium bottle of craft whiskey, accessories, and a ton more. And every story makes the whiskey. So basically, you're going to pay, you're going to join the club, and they're going to send you a box that's going to tell you the story of that distillery that makes that whiskey. So you're going to join flavors, community, it's going to curated distillery items. Every whiskey is going to tell you a story. So you join the club, you go over to rackhousewhiskey.club.com, you join. Basically, they're going to deliver that box with that handcrafted whiskey, handcrafted spirits, whatever you want, every 2 months. And it's in a box curated by a head distiller. Then you're going to enjoy that with your friends, family, and the Rack House community. So what exactly do you get in this fancy box that's going to show up every few weeks at your door? Well, you're going to get a 750 ml bottle of premium craft spirit, whiskey accessories curated by the head distiller, certain cocktail recipes, as well as some tasting notes. So you get a ton in this box that's going to show up every couple of months. Go over to rackhousewhiskeyclub.com. It's the perfect Father's Day gift. Go over there, do it now, join the club, and get your drink on. Do it now. Do it now. Perfect Father's Day gift. rackhousewhiskeyclub.com. All right, coming up on the other side, Dizzy Reed from Guns N' Roses.
All right, I am here with my guest, the amazing keyboard player from Guns N' Roses, Dizzy Reed. I really appreciate you taking out the time to join me today.
Thank you. I'm taking some time from my amazing time.
So before we get into the solo record, I've always had this question. Where exactly did you come up with the name Dizzy Reed from?
Reed is my last name, and my first name is Diswald. So it's no, it's a long story. It's kind of boring. You wouldn't want it on your podcast.
Well, I've just always been curious because, like I said, I think that's a pretty cool, unique name. I like when guys have stage names, so I was always curious about how you came up with Dizzy Reed.
It's more of a nickname. The band I was in before I joined Guns N' Roses, they used to call me Dizzy to kind of fuck with me. So I just started going, but I took that away from them by just changing my name to Dizzy. See how that works?
It's perfect.
So, yeah. You take something bad and turn it into something good.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's great. I've just always been curious about it. I'm like, where did he come up from? And I tried to do research for it, and I could not find where Dizzy came up from.
Because you're the only person who cares. That's why.
I guess that must be my mega fandom for Guns N' Roses then.
Well, that's cool, though. I appreciate it.
So first, the new solo album is out. Rock and Roll Ain't Easy, man. And I must say, this is some really, really good shit, man. Like the first track just kicks you right in the balls.
Thank you. That was kind of our goal, I guess. We wanted girls to like it too, though. So we can't really kick them in the balls.
Well, I will say this: last night we were out, having a little party before we went out, and I put the new solo record on, and all friends, girls, guys were like, "Who is this? This is really, really good." I was like, "Dizzy Reed from Guns N' Roses." So the response that I've heard from just my small circle of people and other things is that it's really a phenomenal record.
Well, that's good to hear, man. And maybe they'll do the same thing, and then it'll spread. Just people. Yeah.
So, where did the title "Rock and Roll Ain't Easy" come from? Because that, to me, is like that's a great title.
We took it from the track, from the song, the title track. What became the title track, and it's just I just kind of gone full circle in my life. I was back to like sort of living out of my truck. All my stuff was in my truck. I was sort of squatting in this apartment and just wondering what happened. I was going through a divorce, and not much was happening with guns at that time, and but I had started compiling material for a record, and we knew we needed something sort of that epic sort of I don't want to say ballad, I don't like the B word, but a song like that. And that it just kind of came out, man. It was I took a bad situation, I turned it into something positive.
Awesome, yeah, because that's great, good stuff. Because like I said, my favorite tracks so far are "This Isn't Las Vegas," the first track. Tell me a little bit about that song, because that song just really is awesome stuff. What's that song exactly about? How did that one come in? Because the guitar solo, I believe, is Richard Fortus from Guns plays the solo on that, right?
Yes, he does. Richard plays a lot of stuff on the record, and he's amazing, and he really lifted it to the level where it needed to be. Just had to throw that in there. So "This Don't Look Like Vegas" was a song that my co-producer and good friend Del James and another good friend of mine, Ricky Warwick, who is the lead singer for Black Star Riders, and Thin Lizzy when they were Thin Lizzy. They brought that song in, or the idea for the song, and so it's really the kind of their twisted adventure. I don't really know exactly what it's about, but I just kind of rounded it out with my own thoughts, So it's just it's cool imagery, and it can be whatever you want to make it, But yeah, it's a good one.
It definitely is. So who did you get? Obviously, Ricky Warwick played a part in that, and Del James plays a part in the record. Who else plays on the record? Were you able to recruit kind of for this solo album venture?
Well, I mean, I think on the record, there's a list of all the people that played on it, and really, we didn't have a band, so we wanted to, just sort of bring in different people for different songs, and there was a lot of people who were kind enough and cool enough to want to come down and be a part of it. And, that just comes from myself and Del being in Hollywood for so long. There's a lot of great musicians here still, and so yeah, there was a whole shitload of people. I don't have the list in front of me, but a lot of people that would never have played together, like Adrian from No Doubt and Chuck Wright from Quiet Riot and Bumblefoot are all on the same song. You would never really get that in other situations. Jeff Duncan, some Armored Saint, DC4, plays on Mother Teresa, just balls out guitar. He's an old friend of mine. He's one of the first people I met when I moved to LA. So yeah, who else? Oh, there's a list here. Let me see. Oh yeah, Mike Dupke from Wasp. Mike Duda, I had some stuff demoed up, and he was one of the first people to say, you should go record this stuff, And obviously Richard Fortus, Frank Ferrer plays in a couple songs. Frankie Banali from Quiet Riot plays drums in a few songs. Alex Grossi from Quiet Riot plays guitar. Tommy Stinson's on a song. So there's a shitload. Mars Williams from Psychedelic Furs. Yeah, on and on.
That's really cool that you kind of reached out and grabbed a bunch of musicians that, maybe wouldn't play together like that and kind of, I wouldn't say super group, but create unique situations to play together.
And let me tell you something. It's not an easy thing to do, and Dell had a lot to do with that, sort of orchestrating who's going to play on what. But, when you get sort of set up in the studio to do a record, especially with the drums and whatnot, you kind of get that set and then you just, you knock it out basically. But in our situation, we brought in different drummers, and so it took a while, but I think we got the right people for the right songs.
It definitely shows through that you can hear. Like I said, I could pick Richard's guitar. Was like, oh, I know that. I've heard that kind of soloing right away. So that's was like, okay, I can tell that. In terms of the songwriting process for everything, were these, obviously you mentioned you were kind of demoing some stuff. Was this, you wrote all the songs and kind of composed with the guys, or were there some outside songwriters or some of the guys bringing stuff to you and it just kind of came together like that?
Basically I got my first sort of computer little system at home, and I was just, so I had this whole sort of newfound way of expressing myself. Before that, you have to go into a recording studio and spend money and demo your stuff up, or on a little 4-track or whatever. We used to have these little machines that would break after like 2 years. I did most of the writing. And when it came to like the lyrics and whatnot, then I would sort of hand it off to Dell, and he could put it into a better grammatic, I guess, context. Sometimes I can't really bust out of that. And then also there were some songs where I was like, based on some of my personal experiences, and I just said to Dell, if I have to sing this song every night, I'll fucking kill myself. So can you just change the words? So that worked. There's a couple songs, like Mother Teresa was, that was 2 songs originally. And Dell sort of said, you should take the chorus from this song and the verse and stuff from this other song and put them together, which is all great until I tried to do it and realized they're in a different key, different tempo. So it took me about 2 solid days to try to work that out. And I think I busted a few things in my apartment out of frustration. But he was right. It turned out to be really cool. So other than that, I think, I did the majority of the writing on it.
Awesome. So right around, obviously you did the majority of the writing. Obviously you said you had some downtime from Guns. So how long has this kind of been in the process, you writing and finally, okay, I'm going to do a solo record, Has it been, a year, couple years, something in that nature?
I guess, yeah, I probably had some stuff sitting around this demos. One of my favorite things to do was, especially back then, was, get drunk and play my demo tapes for people. And so that was, I had started writing about 2 years or something. And when then people started listening to them and say, just go record it. And then Dell ended up finding a studio that would have us. And that was about 10 years ago. So it's, for a lot of reasons, it took a long time.
So have you always kind of in the back of your mind, as you got into Guns and you've done your various other bands, have you always said, I'd love to do a solo record one day? Was that kind of your thing, or you just kind of, hey, I had these songs, let's record them?
I think, when I got into Guns, my first priority was to get Guns N' Roses to do one of my songs, because it's got a much better chance of being something that's successful and of more people hearing it. But I think as a musician, I think most people at some point, have decided they want to do something like that just to see what it's like, if nothing else. It was, it was very cool for me just to be in there and have like no sort of restrictions. And just, I just kind of went crazy in there. Actually, I kind of dug myself a hole because I try to play these songs live now. I can't do all the stuff that I want to do, but it's at some point I think everybody decides that they want to do something like that.
Yeah, because it's like I said, it really shows how great of a musician you are with the solo record. And as the minute came out, I've really enjoyed just really the diversity in the material.
Well, thank you very much. I want to point out too, one of the things that we wanted to do with this record was when we wanted to do it as, for lack of a better description, we wanted to do it like old school. We wanted to do everything sort of live, and as opposed to like, computer based. We did a lot of editing and all that on the computer, but we captured everything as a performance, and you don't really get that as much these days.
Yeah, which is great because you can kind of get that old school vibe of 4 or 5 guys in a room and working at it and creating great music.
And that's what we did. Exactly.
So one of the things I've always been why did you particularly pick up the keyboards? And especially in rock and roll, you got your guitar heroes, your frontmen.
Right.
What drew you to the keyboard or piano-esque player?
I learned, that was the first instrument I learned how to play. My grandmother had an organ. They lived in an apartment upstairs from us when I grew up, and I was about 8 years old or something. And my brother and I used to go up there and just beat on it and make noise. And one day I was up there by myself. She said, "Why don't you learn how to play something?" And I watched her play. It was a Christmas Carol of some sort, and I sat down and played it back. And so she saw that I had an ear for music and an interest, and so she sort of encouraged that. And then I was in the 6th grade. I got asked to join a band called the Hairy Bananas because I had a little instrument. I can't remember what it's called. My grandma got it at Radio Shack because they moved away and she wanted me to have something, and we didn't have a lot of money, so it was like a little mini synthesizer. It had a little pencil and a keyboard on it, and you touched the key and it made a sound. And I'd show that to some friends of mine, and they liked that. And so when they started the band, they said, "Hey, we want that in the band." And so I think we played "Smoke on the Water," and we all sang it, but we had a microphone in front of me so I could hear the synth thing. And so I ended up being the lead singer of that band eventually. But I always had a keyboard just to sort of express myself and to play cool songs like the Doors and the Stones and stuff like that. So yeah, I guess it's just what I knew. It's just kind of what I fell into, I guess. But yeah, my first band for the first, I guess we started when I was 12 years old till I was probably 20. I was the lead singer for that band. So at one point I decided I might have a better chance of getting into a good band if I'm a keyboard player. And so then I think I made the right choice, basically.
Absolutely. Did you have any, especially because sometimes in rock and roll they can be few and far between. Did you have any like, I want to be, any keyboard, guys look up to, the Eddie Van Halens, the Randy Rhoads, anything like, were you John Lord from like that you looked up to certain guys?
Yeah, when you talk about rock and roll keyboards, you can't help from bringing up John Lord. He's amazing. Unfortunately for me, I didn't have all that gear when I was a kid. I had a Wurlitzer that I could carry around with me, and I had to fix it myself. I had to tune it myself. Which, if you ever tried to tune a Wurlitzer, it's not easy. You need a soldering gun and a little X-Acto knife, and a tuning key. But yeah, John Lord, of course, I wanted to be like him. And there's a lot of great piano players I looked up to. Billy Powell, and Leonard Skinner. That guy's amazing. And Elton John, of course. But yeah. Oh, and I got to point Booker T in the MGs. He's the man on the organ.
Those are all great guys. And it's just, when you really name them, you're like, wow, there are a lot of keyboard players in rock and roll. And you were really for me, I'm probably obviously going to show my age being a lot younger, for the first one that I really thought, I'm like, wow, he's doing a lot and adding a lot to the music.
Yeah, that's definitely the goal. It's tough, I got to point out most of the music that I listened to growing up, and most of the bands that I played in are all guitar-based bands. So it's hard. It's very it's not easy to put. Anyone can just play something just to have it on there, but it has to be the right part. It has to sit in the mix. It has to add to the song. It can easily take it, and the organ part can change the mood of the song entirely. So you have to pick and choose with a little bit of you have to see the big picture, basically.
Yeah, something like Estranged, that middle part with the keys, it adds so much to that song.
Yes, that song is it's sort of a piano-based song. It was written on the piano, and that's one. I like to sort of improvise when I'm playing. I like to say there's probably some songs I've never played the same twice, but Estranged, you have to play it the same every time because people are expecting to hear that. So, and it's the base of the song.
It's your famous equivalent keyboard solo to a guitar solo.
Right, and I didn't even play it on the record. It's amazing.
So obviously you've got the solo record out, but you've also got Hookers and Blow. How in the world did you come up with that name? That's an amazing name.
How did I come up with that? There was a friend of mine when he would be in dire straits and start to panic, he would yell out, "I need hookers and blow!" and I told him that one day, you know what? I'm going to start a band called Hookers and Blow one day. And I guess it was probably about 2003 or 2003. I was playing down this place called The Joint, and here in LA. And there was like a jam night every Wednesday or something. I can't remember, but I'd met some guys that were local musicians. They're a bit younger than me, and they approached me about doing some shows back in the East Coast, around Connecticut, New York, New England, and it was decent money, and they wanted to call it, and because I wasn't doing anything, I said, yeah, that sounds like fun. And they wanted to call it Dizzy's All-Star Band or something like that. I said, you know what? Let's call it Hookers and Blow, and that was it. It was born. And then I came up with the cocaine font, and we made the T-shirts, and the rest is history.
Awesome. And Hookers and Blow, you guys mainly do covers, or are you in works to do original stuff too?
Well, we've always just been a cover band, and with Hookers and Blow, our goal was to do everything opposite of what we'd always done in the music business. We're going to try not to get a record deal, and basically just not care. And that sort of grew into something. Although we do care, but we just don't care. I don't know. It's hard to explain. However, since my record is out now, we've been transitioning, and we are going to have been including songs from my record in the set. So get a little bit of both, some cool cover songs and some cool original songs.
And you guys have a tour coming up with I'm drawing a blank on it. I have it.
We have the Dead Daisies.
Yeah, Daisies. That's it. Are you guys looking? Is it going to be kind of a mixture of covers and your original, or are you going to try solely to focus on your solo stuff with that?
It's there'll be a little both. We do a lot of like deeper Guns N' Roses cuts that have like keyboards, piano, and but we're gonna do a lot more of my songs, and it's gonna be interesting because I played with the Dead Daisies for I guess 2.5 years and did 2 records with them. So they were kind enough to offer us this tour, and we're really looking forward to it, man. It's gonna be awesome. Yeah,
Dead Daisies is a great band. Your solo stuff is good stuff, so that's going to be a phenomenal tour.
Yeah, it should be. Hopefully, we'll survive. It should be fun.
So obviously, everybody knows you from Guns N' Roses, but you've got your solo stuff. You've got Hookers and Blow. You played with Dead Daisies. How do you find it managing being in multiple projects? Because obviously, you got into the scene. It was you focused on one band. A lot of musicians keep the money flowing. They've got to be in 3 or 4 projects. How do you find the balance of all of that?
Well, it's the formula is that Guns N' Roses are number one, and then I just kind of go from there. If the stars align, then that makes it a lot easier. And a lot of times things do fall into place, but it takes some juggling, it takes some management, and it's not an easy thing. I got into the music business so that I wouldn't have to work, and I find myself, I say this all the time, I find myself working nonstop now, and you just have to stay on top of it. It's a rock and roll ain't easy, man. I'm telling you.
So obviously with Hookers and Blow, and obviously you play smaller kind of clubs. How do you find the transition from, you know, Guns N' Roses, you're playing arenas, stadiums, to now I've got to go to a club? Which one are there pros and cons to both? Which one do you like better?
There are pros and cons to both. But as far as which one I like better, I mean, the goal when you play music live in front of people is to play in front of as many people as possible. So I pretty much have to go with stadiums in that situation. But there's something, I guess, I don't want to say refreshing, or it's good for you to get back to the clubs once in a while to remember where you came from. And there's also something cool about that intimacy. You can actually talk to people and you gauge their reaction pretty quickly on what you're doing. And that's, you have to be able to, if you're the front man, you have to know how to deal with that. You have to get through the negative shit. You can't let it get to you. Not that there is negative stuff; it's usually positive. But you have to, entertain people and give them a good time. And everybody's out there working hard. And they come, they choose to come see something I'm doing, man. I appreciate that. So I want to give them the best that they can get, and they can feel that in a club, they can feel that in a stadium. Then either way.
Oh, absolutely. You got, whether you're in Guns or you're doing Hookers and Blow, I've seen both, and you're phenomenal. And that's, I think one of the biggest things is from newer rock bands is putting on a show, and I feel like the bands that you're in do that very well.
My thoughts on that are that I think a lot of the way things are now, I mean, you can make a record in your living room, in your bedroom, and that's cool. But one of the things that makes you grow as a musician is playing in front of people. When I grew up, that was your only sort of outlet. We didn't have money to go make records or even record anything. We just went and played in front of people, and that's how you honed your craft. I started doing that when I was very young. It's very important to anyone who wants to be in a band to know that you have to go out. You have to take the good. You have to grow from the bad. When you have a bad show, that makes you better. That has to make you better. Because if you don't get better, if you don't change anything, then you should just stop. And that's how you become a good musician. You can become really, really good at making music on your computer, but if you want to play that in front of people, you got to go play in front of people. There's no substitute for that.
Yeah, there is. The live setting is. I love listening to records, but going to a show, playing a show, there's something about that that's special.
Yes, it's that connection. It's real. Even if they have backing tracks or whatever, they're still up there performing, and it's when you're in the same building, that's something you can't replace.
Totally. So I'll kind of piggyback off that a little bit. How obviously the music business has changed so much. What have you seen that's so different? Maybe that's a little more difficult now today than it was when you got in at almost 12 years old.
Well, I think I mean that situation, you can go play at clubs and stuff, anywhere. If you're trying to get a deal, if you're trying to make records and stuff, that's completely different than it was, not maybe even 10 years ago. For the longest time, and the whole time I grew up, and for the first several years I was in Guns N' Roses, or when I moved to LA in the 80s, the labels controlled everything, and there were more labels back then. They started to sort of absorb each other and become big conglomerates. But that was your only way, and your chances of getting a record deal back in the 80s, for instance, were pretty slim. It was. I remember I grew up in Colorado, and in Boulder, Colorado, and I started hanging out down in Denver, and I heard about this band called Gauntlet, and they were like, all the guys hated them, all the chicks loved them. I saw them open for Rat, and I said to myself, all the girls are standing up screaming, all the guys were sitting down. I said, I want to join that band. And I did, and we moved to LA. And we were the best band in Denver at that time. We were the biggest thing. We moved out to LA. We were the bottom of the totem pole. There was like thousands and thousands of other bands out here trying to get a record deal. So, and they were all the best band from their town. So yeah, your chances of getting a deal were pretty slim, and you had to be in LA or New York or London, and you weren't going to get signed. So over time that changed, but now it's, the labels are, they don't do rock music anymore. I don't know what they do, but you can make, I could make a record right now in my apartment if I wanted to, and it would probably sound pretty good. So that's all changed a lot.
It definitely has. Would you think that we'll ever see kind of that resurgence where we had a big scene in the 80s where there was everybody flocking to one place like that?
I don't think so. I mean, if we do, it'll be sort of, fabricated or manufactured or something, I guess. But the good thing about all that is that you can do stuff. You don't have people. It's, at some point people started getting signed from their hometown. It's just like, and then so that's cool. You don't have to come out to LA. You don't have to be. The spotlight can be on you where you're at with your crowd, with your people. And then you could take that on the road. So that's a good thing, but I don't think it's necessary anymore. I don't know. There was a lot of energy out here back then. It wasn't all positive, but there was a lot of energy. But just, it's gone now, and it's just part of the past.
Absolutely. I would, like I said, I was born in '89. I would have loved to have been there in the heyday.
Well, it's you were a product of the '80s.
Absolutely, yes. So also just some general Guns N' Roses things. You guys got a few dates coming up in Europe, I believe.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
How is things going preparing for that?
We've been in rehearsals. We started last week, and it's going great, and it's good to get back in there with the guys and make some noise. And it's sounding better than ever, man. I got to say that the lineup that we have right now is just fucking fantastic, man. It's amazing, and it's just every time we play, I say to myself, I'm so flippin' lucky to be able to do this for a living. I really am.
I saw you on this current tour, the Not in This Lifetime. I saw you 3 times. It just gets better and better and better.
Awesome, man. Yeah, so hopefully that trend will continue. I'm pretty sure it will.
So, obviously you came in to GNR and to Use Your Illusion. What was kind of the first song that you really had, I wouldn't say writing credits to, but you first kind of played with the guys and gave that keyboard aspect to?
Well, the very first thing I ever did with Guns was called me to come in the studio to do Civil War, and so that was that's right away, right off the bat. Axel had me sing on the chorus and then play the piano part, and it was remember that's the first time I heard myself on radio. I was like, holy shit. That was a very cool experience. But yeah, that right off the bat. So yeah, Civil War.
That's a terrific song to come into because that's a killer song.
It is a great song.
So in doing some research for today, I found that you're a member of a fraternity and you didn't even go to college.
Ivy League, nonetheless.
Yeah. How did that come about?
I am Zeta Psi, Cornell University. Thank you. I'm also Pi Phi from the what's it called? University of West Virginia.
That's awesome.
Myself and a couple of the guys in the band back in the 90s, we were sworn to a sorority. I'm a member of a fraternity and a sorority, and I've never gone to college. Thank you.
That is rock and roll stuff right there.
Yeah, it's one of my prouder accomplishments. Thank you. It's on my resume.
I'm sure you could probably could have shown them a thing or two about partying,
Well, I'm pretty sure, I'm not positive, but when I was up at Cornell it was their pledge week, and they do a thing where they go to this Chinese restaurant, and they instead of beer stands, they do wine stands, like boxes of wine, and I'm pretty sure I shattered the record.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if I was in this, I'd be freaking out. I'd be like, "Dude, this is Dizzy Reed from Guns N' Roses. He can have whatever he wants."
Well, it's kind of not fair because at that point I was a seasoned drinker and they were, they're just kids, but whatever. I did it.
Awesome. Yeah, like I said, that is definitely something to put on the resume.
Or, when I go and apply for a bank loan, I put that on there.
So, don't want to keep you too much longer here. Just want to wrap up with a couple more questions. What are some of your favorite songs to play live?
In overall, in general, or?
Yeah, overall. Overall.
I've always, when I was doing my thing in my various cover bands along the way, and with Hookers and Blow, and the DFR experience and the shows, all the different bands I've played in, I used to cover this Warren Zevon song called "Splendid Isolation," and I always had a blast playing it. It's the bonus track. If you buy the vinyl, it gives you the bonus track. It's probably, I don't know, maybe it's available on iTunes, but that's one of my favorite songs to play. And a lot of people encourage me to go record it because it's, it just felt really good live. But with Guns, I like playing Estranged. It's great, a challenge, but it's really cool. And Civil War too, because it just makes me think, that's the first thing I ever did with them. And any song by the Rolling Stones. That's my answer.
Awesome. Another quick question for Guns, man, you guys got to put Bad Obsession in the set because that's a great song.
Funny. We haven't played that in a long time, but if you go see Hookers and Blow, we might do Bad Obsession. Just saying.
That's a great song. That's one of the first Guns songs I ever heard. And I was like, man, this is killer.
I love it. It's one of my favorites too.
So, Rock and Roll Ain't Easy is the name of the solo album. Where can everybody find it? Where can they find where you're going to be on tour, your social media, all of that?
Yep. It is okay. It's available on iTunes now. It's available digitally worldwide. You can order it on Amazon. It comes out it's out right now in Australia, New Zealand, Japan. It comes out worldwide June 1st. So you'll be able to go buy the actual physical copy at that point, or you can order it on Amazon. But if you can't wait, it's on iTunes right now. And we start Guns N' Roses. We start our European tour at June 1st, and then I believe Hookers and Blow and the Dead Daisies, that begins August 16th in Cleveland, Ohio. And we'll be all over, up in Canada and in Los Angeles. So we're going to cover a lot of cities, a lot of places, and we'll be out there we'll be doing some meet and greets and some record signings and all that good shit that comes along with touring. And can't wait to see everybody. It's going to be a blast.
It is. So, and then where can they find you on your social media? You have all of it.
What is my social media? I don't even know. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter and all the other stuff. Instagram too.
Awesome. So I'll make sure that everybody checks that out. I really thank you for joining me, taking out the time out of your busy schedule. Join me for a few minutes.
Thank you. I'm going to figure out what my social media stuff is, and then it was great talking to you, man. Thank you.
It was, and thank you so much, and I really enjoy the record. I recommend that everybody go and pick it up.
Awesome. Thank you, man. Yeah. Right on, brother.
All right, man. Thank you.
Talk to you soon. Peace.
All right, I want to thank Dizzy Reed once again for joining me, man. Super, super cool dude, super talented musician, and in my favorite band of all time, and in my opinion, the greatest band of all time, Guns N' Roses. Make sure you go check out his solo album called Rock and Roll Ain't Easy. It's out digitally now. You can stream it on Spotify. You can download it on iTunes. The physical copy, if you're old school and want to buy a physical copy, comes out June 1st. He's going to be out there with his band Hookers and Blow, a late summer touring with the Dead Daisies, and if you happen to be in Europe and listening, he'll be on tour with Guns N' Roses coming up in the summertime. So definitely go check out Dizzy and all of his various projects. Definitely thank him for joining me, and I highly recommend going and checking out the Rock and Roll Ain't Easy solo record by Dizzy Reed. And if you heard there after the interview, I was listening myself back to it a couple of times. You did hear a little bit of staticky, a little bit of all audio things, but didn't mess up the quality of the interview. You could still hear what both of us were saying. A lot of people have asked, why don't you use Skype? Why do you do it over the phone? I like doing it over the phone because it gives me, it makes me different than a lot of podcasts. A lot of podcasts tend to use, Skype, and yes, they get the clear audio and everything, but I think it's kind of cool and it gives it an element of old school. I'm an old soul at heart, obviously, being a big 80s fan with my music choices. I like things kind of that have an old school vibe, and it gives it kind of that radio vibe over the phone type deal. Yes, it would be perfect if I could do all my interviews in person. That's in a perfect world. I don't think Dizzy Reed's going to do an in-person interview with me just at the drop of a hat. So it's very cool. Yes, Skype is great, but I like the phone aspect because it's good, and I think that's something that a lot of people in today's world don't use as much, is having a telephone conversation compared to, I'll just text you or whatever it may be. I think using the telephone is great, and I think that kind of makes this podcast a little bit different, and that we do things over the phone. We don't do Skype. I like to either do it in person or over the phone. Skype is great, but I think over the phone works just as well, and I think it kind of gives it a little bit of flavor that's something different out there than every other podcast out there. But we may give Skype a try here or there, but I really enjoy doing these things over the phone. So once again, want to highly recommend that you check out Rock and Roll Ain't Easy by Dizzy Reed. Please do that. It's a great solo record. I've listened to it up and down several times over the weekend. It's good stuff. Make sure you're following the podcast on all the social media platforms: Twitter, Nick's RW Podcast. Make sure you're as well Facebook, Nick's Rock and Wrestling Podcast, Instagram, Rock and Wrestling Podcast, Rock and Wrestling Podcast at Gmail. Find us on YouTube. I'm a little bit behind on the YouTube. I'll get them up there, I swear. Rock and Wrestling Podcast store on Pro Wrestling Tees. So you go to prowrestlingtees.com/Rock and Wrestling Podcast store, or just go to prowrestlingtees.com, go to podcast online media store, scrolling down, find Rock and Wrestling Podcast, get yourself a shirt. Going to be having my second shirt up there in the coming weeks. Want to thank once again The Creature Lives over at Instagram. It's at @thecreature_lives. Go follow him on Instagram and Twitter. It's the same handle for both. He does various things, whether it be stickers, shirts. He's also a major toy collector. Help a brother out. Go follow him. He's good stuff. He'll hook you up with whatever you need in terms of print, screen print, posters, everything like that. So definitely go give him a follow. And if you need anything like that, definitely do that. As well, I want to thank the sponsor of today's show, Rack House Whiskey Club. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, you go to rackhousewhiskeyclub.com, sign yourself up. They bring you a new whiskey. You get to learn all about that whiskey. Definitely go over and sign up for that. Plugging that because it's my uncle's business venture, hooking them up. So, as we round out today's podcast, I want to kind of do something different here. And obviously, I debuted a new section last week called Pick of the Week. This week, I want to turn you on to a new band that I recently discovered. Obviously, this episode of the podcast heavily music influenced. Obviously, we talked a lot to Dizzy about kind of the difference in what rock and roll is now compared to what it once was when he was coming up, and his solo work and everything in that nature. So I really want everyone to go check that out, but I want to feature a band. They're not a band anymore, but they're a band that was very underground and could have done a lot. They did some touring. This band is actually from right here in California, in Santa Cruz. They're no longer a band. They only did 2 records, but they're called Dirty Penny. I want to feature them, talk a little bit about them. I discovered them in 2010, and they were on tour for their second record. They had 2 records. They were kind of, what was unique about Dirty Penny is they were essentially a glam band. So they had their first record, Take It Sleazy, came out in 2007. Their second record, Young and Reckless, came out in 2009. They kind of had a glam feel to them. Imagine if you know the band Santa Cruz. They're like that, but a little less. Santa Cruz might be a touch heavier guitars, and the vocals might be a little more baritone, deeper than Dirty Penny. But these guys were out of Santa Cruz, California, and dude, I saw them live right here in Orangeville at the Boardwalk in 2010, and they were a good kick-ass rock and roll band. I had a lot of high hopes for them. They broke up not too shortly after I saw them, which sucks, but what was great, I think the bass player went on to play with James Durbin, who was on American Idol, and some of his solo stuff. They had a big connection with James Durbin because James Durbin is from Santa Cruz, California. Hopefully we're going to get James on the podcast one day. I'd love to talk wrestling and talk about him being the singer of Quiet Riot now. But this is a great band. So this is kind of my pick of the week, kind of featured band for this week is Dirty Penny. Go check them out. Good stuff. Some tracks I recommend are Midnight Ride's a really good one. Scream and Shout, Hot and Heavy. I prefer the first record to the second one. The second one they tried to get a little more modern. The first one, Take It Sleazy, was just straight up, hey, we're gonna kind of go old school and be kind of a hair band, hair metal, and I'm a guilty pleasure for that. I think you can be heavy and be a hair band. Motley Crue, one of my all-time favorite bands. So definitely go check them out. They're not a band anymore. I don't think a lot of the guys that were in that band are doing anything musically, but Dirty Penny is a killer rock and roll band. And if you don't know them, you may not know them. In California, Northern California, a lot of people knew about them. But they did several tours in the United States. I think they did 1 or 2 tours of Europe. So they had some momentum, and I think had it been a different time and kind of the way things are now with bands like Santa Cruz and other bands like Crazy Licks, that they might have succeeded a little bit more than they did at that time as they were coming out. There weren't a lot of bands like that. So that's kind of my pick of the week. Dirty Penny. Go check them out. I would set kind of a 1A, 1B pick of the week. Rock and Rollin' AZ by Dizzy Reed on today's guest. So really good stuff. Go check it out. Check both those out. Check out the band Dirty Penny. Check out Dizzy Reed's solo album Rock and Roll Ain't Easy. Also, while you're at it, you got your little phone and Google machine. Go over to Twitter and follow the podcast, Nick's Rock and Wrestling Podcast, Instagram Rock and Wrestling Podcast, YouTube Rock and Wrestling Podcast, Facebook Nick's Rock and Wrestling Podcast, Rock and Wrestling Podcast at Gmail. Go over to prowrestlingtees.com/rock and wrestling podcast store and get yourself a shirt. My second shirt is going to be up shortly. It's going to be the R&W shirt, I'm calling it. The R&W shirt. It's a little take and kind of a rip-off of the NWO. Shh, say that quietly. I don't need Vince to sue me. So it's going to be that up there. So go do that. Hook yourselves up with some sweet merch. I'll give you a shout out right here on the podcast. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I gave you kind of the rundown for the coming weeks. Next week on May 30th will be the Podfather himself, Conrad Thompson. We'll talk all about something to wrestle with, what happened when, 83 weeks, StarCast, how he got hooked up with the All In guys to put on this StarCast event. Might even give myself a little more another shout out as I'll be at StarCast there Labor Day weekend on Podcast Row as well. Then June 6th will be Matt Kuhn, who hosts Wide Ended with Robbie E., where they discuss kind of guys that in the pro wrestling business that had their moment, like D'Lo Brown, Al Snow, former Rock and Wrestling Podcast, Just Incredible, and Mark Kapani, Muhammad Hassan were also on their show talking about kind of why it ended with them. So that's a great podcast. I would also recommend it out. We're going to have Matt Kuhn, the host of that, right here on the Rock and Wrestling Podcast on June 6th. And then June 13th will be Braden. He is from the Bay Area. We're going to talk all about his metal festival he's putting on. We're going to talk about Suburban Paranoia, the band that he sings for, as well as we're going to shoot the shit on some wrestling because he is a huge wrestling fan as well. So those are the coming 3 weeks that you got right here on the Rock and Wrestling Podcast. I appreciate everybody's support. Make sure you go like everything on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all. Go to prowrestlingtees.com, get yourself a shirt. Look for that second shirt that's going to be up in the coming weeks. I appreciate everybody's support, and I will see you next week right here when we have the Podfather himself on here, Conrad Thompson. Peace. I'm out.